Trevor Lawrence is not going to get the easy money that he was hoping for this offseason. If he's not careful, he'll be fighting for a spot with another team and could possibly be added to the long list of first-round QB busts. Head coach Doug Peterson knows how to win and get the best out of his players. In 2017, he was able to guide his team to victory with second-string quarterback Nick Foles. He knows how to put the right kind of pressure on people. What made this so spectacular was the fact that Carson Wentz was the starting quarterback at the time, before he was injured and Nick Foles had to take over, and they didn't even skip a beat. What he is doing now to Trevor is showing him that his spot is not guaranteed in the future. By going and getting Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence now knows that he's on the chopping block and that he isn't going to get the largest contract in football this offseason because he has to prove that he can do it. This is the most pressure that Trevor Lawrence has ever had in his career, and I'm going to go into depth about what both parties want from each other. I love head coach Doug Peterson. He acquired the team after a horrible 2021 season that they had with Urban Meyer. Lucky him, he got Trevor Lawrence as his starting quarterback for the 2022 season. The Jaguars have been known to have many horrible seasons, but nothing was like what happened in 2021. He was thrust into a horrible situation with first-time NFL coach Urban Meyer, who had an ego that was unmatched. Trevor had a horrible first year, throwing 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, and finishing the year with just 3 wins. Trevor Lawrence was quoted that year saying, "It feels like we're not even practicing." That's how bad the team was doing that year. Going into the 2022 season, the Jaguars knew that they were going to have to change something up. And lucky for them, Doug Peterson was sitting there waiting for a head coaching job. After being released from the Eagles because the quarterback position could not be filled, Doug Peterson was left on the market for any team to get him. This was lucky for the Jaguars, who were able to pick him up for the 2022 season and bring some stability to Trevor Lawrence's career. To start the 2022 season, the Jaguars looked like the same old Jaguars, losing 7 of their first 10 games. Then the bye week came, and from that point on, they only lost 1 game. They ended the season going 9-8 and making it to their first playoff game in 5 years. This is when one of the craziest games in playoffs ever happened. The Jaguars were down 23 at home against the Chargers. The Jaguars ended up having 5 turnovers and were down 23 points against the Chargers, who looked unstoppable. But lucky for them, Trevor Lawrence came back and saved the day. After throwing 4 interceptions, he came back and threw 4 straight touchdowns to bring him back and push him over the edge to get the 31-30 win. This type of hype carried through the offseason, even though they lost in the next round. Everyone saw what Trevor Lawrence could be. From the second half of the season to the playoffs, he never gave up, even if he turned the ball over. There was starting to be rumors that Trevor Lawrence would be the highest paid quarterback coming into this offseason. Right now he's going into his 4th year as a quarterback, and now there are no talks about him getting a contract because the Jaguars decided to do something crazy. They went and traded a 6th-round pick for Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones has had a horrible career compared to Trevor Lawrence to start. He went to the Patriots, and everyone was hopeful that he'd be the next Tom Brady. He had the figure for it. He had the dad bod, he wasn't very fast, but he was accurate and could do everything right at Alabama. Things fell apart, and now all of a sudden he finds himself with the Jaguars as a backup to Trevor Lawrence, who was drafted in the same class as him. What the Jaguars are doing here is they're playing mind games with both Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence knows he's the better quarterback, and he knows he can get big money next year if he just fine-tunes some things. The talent is there, but he's just been a little bit off all year. But he has just been a little bit off his whole career. The problem with Mac Jones is he doesn't know where he's going to be. He might just be one of those guys that just goes around from team to team and is just a good backup. But what the Jaguars are doing here is putting this pressure on Trevor Lawrence to get him to show up. I think what Doug Peterson learned from the Eagles was that you cannot let your starting quarterback be comfortable. When he was with the Eagles, he drafted Jalen Hurts, and everybody was shocked about this at the time because Carson Wentz had this large contract. Little did the Eagles know that he would end up becoming their franchise quarterback and being what he is today. What Trevor Lawrence has never had in his career, all the way from high school to Clemson, was some competition behind him that could potentially take his starting role. Right now, he finds himself in a tough situation, fighting for his spot and fighting for money in the future. Last year, he didn't even rank in the top 12 quarterbacks. And the year before that, he looked like he had blossomed into something that was really great. But what stats don't tell you about the 2023 season was how horrible the offensive line was for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, throughout his career, has had a relatively stable and an injury-free path. But this year, his offensive line was ranked 28th overall in the NFL, bottom 5. They had no run game, and they had great wide receivers, but it didn't matter because Trevor never had the time to sit there and throw the ball. And with this bad of an offensive line, he ended up sustaining 4 injuries throughout the season that really affected the way he could play. In week 6, Trevor Lawrence suffered a knee bruise. Then in week 13, he received a high ankle injury playing against the Bengals. This looked like a season-ending injury with the way his leg bent, and everyone thought at the time. Then in week 13, he suffered a high ankle injury against the Bengals. This looked like a season-ending injury with the way his leg bent back. At this point, they had been super hot, and the Jaguars looked like they were finding their groove, but this derailed all momentum. Then in week 15, he got a concussion against the Super Bowl hopeful Ravens, and there was nothing that they could do as injuries started to pile up. Then in week 16, an AC joint injury to his arm in the 4th quarter, and had to miss the game. Through this all, Trevor Lawrence never complained or made any excuses as to why he was not showing up. The threat of Mac Jones starting as the quarterback is that, just a threat. It's just to get Trevor Lawrence squared away so that when they do pay him the big money next year, they feel like they're actually getting a real quarterback. This is just something to give him motivation to play better and focus more. They know Trevor has all the skills and he will be the starting quarterback again this year. And hopefully this is the chip on the shoulder that he needs to get going. He's going to have a great career if he can just play a little better. Now, if you think that Trevor Lawrence has had a tough career so far to date, then you need to watch my video on Russell Wilson, and he has shown us how the grass is not always greener going to another team. His career as of late has been a mess, but will he be able to fix it with the Steelers?